English translation, 256th contact, Monday, 13th May, 1996, 1450 hours.
Hello, Ptaah, my friend. Be welcome. It has been a long time, but if it takes long enough, it will be all right. I had actually expected you on the 3rd of February.
Greetings, my friend Edward. Yes, I know. Unfortunately, it was not possible for me to come here earlier, because my duties called me to other places. But Florina had been instructed by me to visit you and to explain to you that I was indispensable.
I know that. She had also been here explaining the reasons for your not showing up. But she did not come until the 13th of February, because she was also busy and could not show up any earlier.
That is known to me. She had been busy with clarification issues, which, on the one hand, annoyingly affect a core group member and, on the other hand, new negative machinations against you and the group members, as well as against the entire mission. The clarifications have revealed very unpleasant things. For there will be again a time when massive attacks from outside take place again, and specifically from powers that are against you and against the mission. These negative powers are lurking not only from ordinary enemies, but also on the part of your wife and from public information bodies such as newspapers, magazines, radio, and television, but also from sects and religions, as well as from authorities and secret services. To be mentioned are also slanderers such as Calcorf, the various MUFON groups and similar organizations, as well as pseudoscientific groups, which in principle deny anything that is not of purely earthly origin, such as, for example, Sanap, etc. Many allow themselves to be misled by these slanderers, negators, know-it-alls and intriguers, and thereby offer attacking help to those who, out of hatred or envy, out of anxiety, religious sectarian deluded belief, know-it-all attitude, addiction to criticism, self-image, craving for recognition, imperiousness, inferiority complexes, megalomania, arrogance or renunciation, etc., deny our existence and try to undermine and destroy you as well as your mission, like, for example, your wife with immense lies and calumnies. In many cases, the material profit also plays a decisive role in it, which is particularly important for those for whom money means everything and for which no intrigue and defamation, as well as no lie or fraud, is too low for them. And these kind of human beings can, sadly, be found on the earth in abundance, whereby many of them do not shrink from slandering ourselves in the kind and wise that we would be in contact with them and that we would supposedly convey messages and teachings to them, as it is claimed particularly mendaciously by persons of American origin, whereby this evil has, however, also already spread to Switzerland and Japan, as well as to Germany, Poland and the CIS countries, to Austria, Italy, Israel, Spain, France, the Scandinavian countries, the Czech Republic, and to several other countries. The group members, and you will feel this more strongly in the future, the same as also the newly emerging attacks, which are undertaken from around the world, whereby your wife plays a decisive role. Not only you and your person will be included in that, but also all core group members and the members of the passive groups around the world. All your efforts in the domain of truth spreading and fulfillment of the mission will also be increasingly slandered and affected, and specifically both the efforts of the core groups and also the passive groups. Personal rights and the personal freedom as well as workplaces can also be negatively affected. With all this comes a time that demands special attention and special efforts regarding the sustainability and mission fulfillment of all members of the FIGU, TUNC, and namely the core group members as well as the passive members. A special resilience will be required, because from now on the slanders, attacks and false accusations will become ever more drastic. because the time begins to press for certain elements, such as, for example, for your wife, or because the aggressors in their renunciation, imperiousness, arrogance, might obsession, in their greed for profit and in their anxiety or in their mendacious cover-up and truth-discriminating actions, feel attacked and disadvantaged. You, as well as all members of the core group and passive groups, will henceforth be particularly challenged, so that once again the chaff will separate itself from the corn, because whoever will not fully and totally stick to the truth from now on will fall away from it and sink into the sea of irrationality and of the slander of truth.
One again, great prospects. Well, and what is the unpleasant thing about one group member?
The matter is the following.
Purely internal matter of the core group.
I think so too. I will take up the matter. I would like to ask you once something concerning the pyramids, which are to be found not only in Egypt, but around the world. Asket told me in her time that they were originally created under the direction of extraterrestrials. She stated then, in 1956, that the pyramids were built twice 36,650 years ago, and consequently 73,300 years ago. Since then 40 years have passed, therefore the time of origin of the pyramids must have been 73,140 years ago. Just in this regard, however, our scientists claim something else, because they put the time of construction much later, just short millennia before the birth of Emmanuel.
I am aware of this misrepresentation and miscalculation. If you calculate from the present time, the pyramids were indeed built about 73,140 years ago, and actually not just those in Egypt, but all around the earth, which at that time had a distance to the sun of 152.5 million kilometers. The pyramids were covered with a dense layer of limestone and lime mortar in the exterior form, and were therefore also higher than they are today. So the Great Cheops Pyramid measured 152.5 meters in height at that time, which corresponds to 1 meter per 1 million kilometers of Earth-Sun distance. But these exterior layers were removed again in the course of the millennia, as well as parts of the pyramids themselves, and specifically by weathering on the one hand, and by the human beings who used the material to construct other buildings, etc., on the other hand. The purpose of the pyramids also underwent changes from time to time, and in the end they were used as grave sites as well as otherwise, also as cultic temples. Originally, the pyramid buildings, as well as the subterranean rooms that were often connected with them, were built under the direction of human beings who were of extraterrestrial origin and who at that time came from the regions of the constellation Orion, which is why the Egyptian pyramids were also constructed formation-wise as an image of this constellation, while the Sphinx structure was aligned to the constellation Leo. The found hieroglyphs and the use of the pyramid chambers as grave sites, etc., traces back to the more recent times before Emmanuel, and specifically from around 2,000 years ago to the past of slightly more than 13,000 years. The subterraneous chambers, which were part of all pyramids, reached considerable proportions and created subsurface villages of various sizes, which were used by the human beings to get themselves to safety in the face of dangers looming from Earth or outer space.
Thank you. This information is sufficient for me. Is it possible to ask officially today how things unfolded in relation to John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the USA, who was murdered in Dallas, Texas, on the 22nd of November, 1963.
It was a plot of various interest groups consisting of CIA, FBI, Mafia, pro-Cubans, oil barons, and the military-industrial complex. Lee Harvey Oswald and 3 other men collaborated with the alliance of conspirators, resulting in them insidiously shooting the U.S. president.
Scientific investigation proves Kennedy's assassin was not the lone shooter.
Washington. For years, the CIA and FBI tried desperately to convince Americans and the world that President John F. Kennedy was shot by lone assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, an ex-U.S. Marine turned by the Soviet Union. But now is war. The assassination was a plot, the fatal bullet fired by another perpetrator. Already 22 years ago, the official White House Commission, after studying all the files, had concluded that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on the 22nd of November 1963 was very likely the result of a frame-up. From Grassy Knoll, a small hill with bushes, shots were also fired. And at the exact same time that Lee Harvey Oswald fired his 3 shots from a warehouse window at the president passing by in a convoy on the road. The shots were also fired from the Grassy Knoll, a small hill with bushes. The House Commission also relied primarily on a tape recording at Dallas Police Headquarters. There, the sounds were recorded from a police officer's radio, which had been mistakenly left off standing on the grassy knoll. Clearly, a gunshot-like sound can be heard on it. The Warren Commission. It officially dealt with the Kennedy assassination and claimed from the very beginning Oswald was the sole perpetrator. And a panel of the National Academy of Sciences completely denied the conspiracy theory and claimed that the alleged gunshot was a random sound, at best a misfire. They also claimed that the sound was recorded about a minute later, at a time when President Kennedy was already on his way to the hospital. But now the forensic scientist D.B. Thomas, commissioned by the U.S. government, proves that shots were indeed fired from the grassy knoll. The scientist concludes that with 96.3% certainty, this shot, fired virtually simultaneously with the 3rd shot from the warehouse, was also the shot that entered the back of President Kennedy's head and killed him. D.B. Thomas is also unable to answer the question of why the Warren Commission and the Secret Services are so unwilling to know about a JFK assassination plot.
Original newspaper article Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 27th March 2001.
Arguably, shots were fired at John Fitzgerald Kennedy by Oswald as well as the others involved, but the truly fatal shot did not come from Oswald's gun.
Who Oswald in turn was shot by Jack Ruby, whose real name was Rubenstein.
That is right. He was a Jewish extremist and also a hired murderer with the task to shoot Oswald, because the responsible persons of the plot did not trust him and rated him as an element of uncertainty.
I still have a few questions, one of which concerns an alleged medium called Ingo Swann, as well as a major of the U.S. Army called E.D., who operate the so-called PSI tech, an alleged technical remote viewing, by which even the most secret things are supposed to be recognized and discovered from afar, as is claimed. At least such a thing is claimed in Magazine 2000, from page 81 onwards. It is thereby also clarified that one would be able to meet the said E.D. in Germany, who would provide a 3-day seminar over there at an outrageous price of 1,800 German mark. First, do you know anything of this story? Second, is this E.D. to be taken seriously? Thirdly, what about the Swan medium? Fourth, what to make of this remote viewing?
We are aware of these claims and machinations. The man E.D. is one of many who, with unhonest means, pull the money out of the pockets of the faithfully and stupidly believing human beings. The remote viewing training course he has initiated is an infamous fraud, just as the alleged remote viewing corresponds to pure charlatanism. It is true that the USA and the Soviet Union have carried out studies of the same kind and are still carrying them out today, But this has already for a long time been no secret anymore, because a lot of secret material has leaked to the outside via the so-called remote viewing. The efforts of the secret research of the USA and the Soviet Union brought about certain, but no high-value successes, which can, however, in no wise be connected with the charlatanism of PSI tech. This is not the alleged remote viewing, but rather the name of a so-called firm. With regard to Ingo Swann, it must be said that many things with him are also very unhonest, and that things are being pushed onto him which do not correspond to the truth. Everything is thus to be classified in charlatanism, lies, and fraud, if the facts are really investigated. Excluded from this are only certain secret attempts and secret successes of the USA and Soviet Union in terms of remote perception, that is to say, remote viewing, as the English term for it is.
Thanks. Is there anything you know about a certain Janny King? Recently, I received a fax saying that this woman from North Queensland in Australia has written at least 2 books about
Alleged contacts with me, which of course is just as much a kind of irrational wheeling and dealing as the untenable claims of Penny McLean, Barbara Hand Clue, Barbara Marciniak, and Amora Kuan Yin and others, who engage in wheeling and dealing and claim to be in contact with me or with other persons or some spiritual beings of our people in some form. In the same league also belong FB with his made-up contacts to my daughter Sim Yase, as well as a drain with his story of lies and the alleged contacts in Florida. We have from our side never had such contacts with human beings on Earth, except those known to you, and only those to your person. And there are also no such contacts at present, and in the future also, no such contacts from any human beings on Earth will materialize with any one of our peoples. But if human beings of the Earth nevertheless claim to be in contact with one of us, or with spirit beings of our peoples, then this is equivalent to a lie, to a fraud, or to a charlatanism. Also, schizophrenic processes and suggestive influences as well as self-deception, etc., cannot be ruled out in such cases. Liars, swindlers, fraudsters, charlatans, and persons with delusional sickness of the kind who claim to be in contact with us are unfortunately more and more found on Earth. All of them. As a whole, and I must emphasize strongly all of them, are only poor lunatics, schizophrenics, or other delusional sick ones, or otherwise deliberate liars, swindlers, fraudsters, or charlatans. And in that context, it is interesting to note that only since the time of the official spreading of your mission, and thus, since your appearance in public, that we Pleiades Pleiaren have become the focus of public interest and have been exploited by dozens of delusional sick ones as well as liars, swindlers and charlatans for alleged contacts with them, whereby all these sick and dishonest ones are assessed by practically all UFO circles to be true contactees, and their delusional or lie and fantasy stories are accepted as true, even though no letter of their blathering is correct, while you, as the real contact person with us, are insulted as being a liar and fraudster, and your evidence is reviled as being falsifications. It would be appropriate for you to produce a leaflet on these matters discussed and to hand it over to all interested parties, because the real seekers, as well as all other human beings, have a right to know the fundamental truth.
I will grant your wish. But you know that this does not happen so quickly, because we still have a lot of work to do. But tell me, Florina told me that your investigations showed that Randy Winters was not the only culprit in the case of the mendacious alleged contact reports in Miami, Florida, but that there really would be a man, a Puerto Rican, who makes the lying contact claims and cooperates with Randy Winters in this very regard. I will comply with your wish. But you know that it will not happen so quickly, because we still have a lot of work to do. But tell me now. Florina told me that your investigations had shown that Randy Winters was not the only culprit in the matter of the lying alleged contact reports in Miami, Florida, but that there was in fact a man, a Puerto Rican, who was making the lying contact claims, and in this respect was working together with Randy Winters, who, however, was also deceiving, cheating, and exploiting the liar and deceiver by greedily using his falsified material for commercial profit.
That is correct. It corresponds to the actual situation. Even Winters uses the faked material of this Adrain, as he calls himself, to enrich himself, although he basically knows very well that everything is lies and fraud. Winters is a greedy profiteer, as is also true of Adrain, who tries to get in touch with persons he can hook up with and exploit his fraudulent story. Concerning Winters, it is still to be said that he exposes the man Adrain in the same wise as he has been doing for a long time with you to shady wheeling and dealing, only with the difference that your statements and contacts correspond to the truth, which he knows very well, while the Adrain story is a vicious lie, fraud, swindle, and charlatanism, which Randolph Winters is also fully aware of.
May I ask what this Adrain's real name is?
Unfortunately, I cannot provide you any information about this because I have not yet been informed by Florina in this regard. If it is important to you, then I will ask and will promptly inform you of the name.
Not necessary. It is not that important either.
Well, then I would like to point out to you that the organizational chart, which you have included as the end of the statutes in the statutes, does not correspond to the rightness and must be removed without substitution. The Figu Society is an independent group, and indeed, in every respect. Consequently, it also carries, in every respect, the responsibility for all and everything, with neither you nor us, nor the High Council, nor the Arahat Athersata level, nor the creation, in hierarchical form presiding over and giving orders to the society or the members. The society is led by the totality of members for all decisions, etc., whereby the board and the leadership are responsible for the fact that the resolutions of the society, that is to say the group, are logically implemented and followed, whereby, however, neither the board nor the leadership would have any resolution-making powers over the head of the overall group's resolutions. Board and leadership are practically controlling bodies and executing bodies of the society, whereby, in particular, the leadership person has also to exercise an advisory function but does not have any power for actions and resolutions above the power for resolutions of the entire society membership and thus the General Assembly. Leading persons as well as the board are normal society, that is to say group members, and have always to act solely and exclusively in accordance with the resolutions of the General Assembly of the group members, who are responsible for all decisions and resolutions, as well as implementations and deeds, etc., in every respect according to their own decision and without hierarchical arrangement in any kind and wise whatsoever. So, in all provisions, statements, resolutions, and deeds, the members of the groups, that is to say, the society, are solely and exclusively in charge, without any hierarchical powers being superior to them.
Clear as day. I will make the necessary arrangements. But now I have a question about the initiation. If we become more members, then our pyramid and the room below will no longer be sufficient for all. Building a new pyramid is difficult because we lack the necessary space. What then?
From this, no problem is likely to arise, since both initiation and meditation can in the future be carried out at home in a suitable room by new members. Everything had been designed through Quetzal's timely efforts and his foresight of this possibility, whereby, however, for both the external initiation and meditation process, an appropriate pyramid is necessary, as you have had it already made for years according to Quetzal's specifications. With such a pyramid, a definitive connection to the center's big pyramid is guaranteed. Thus, no difficulties whatsoever arise during the practice of initiation or meditation abroad, as is also the case during holiday periods, as you well know. The principle is the same. However, it is imperative on the whole that a registration and storage in the center's pyramid is carried out first, so that the initiation and meditation powers become effective when they are transmitted by the small pyramids during the initiation and meditation processes. The registration and storage should not pose any difficulties with regard to the times, when from now on no further members will be allowed to use the pyramid, but rather attention be paid that all new members conduct their initiation and meditation at home after the registration and storage, whereby a start in this direction shall already be made with Stefan. The previous female and male use of the pyramid can thus be maintained without difficulties. Therefore also no change is required to be undertaken.
That solves some of our problems.
Quetzal did already point out this possibility to you years ago, but you seem obviously unable to remember it.
In fact, that slipped my mind. Since my collapse on the 4th of November, 1982, I am unfortunately having difficulties with my memory.
That is understandable because you have suffered very serious injuries which are unfortunately partly irreparable. The mere fact that you are still alive and able to continue your difficult mission, that is more...
Yes, I know. Somehow I have just made it.
Through hard efforts, which are not that easy by some all.
Other human beings, too, have already achieved such things, and will continue to achieve them also in the future.
Of course, I have to agree with you on that.
May I ask a question about the Ark of the Covenant?
Nothing stands in the way of that.
Good. The Ark of the Covenant has evidently disappeared. Can you in that context tell me what happened to it?
650 BC, the Ark of the Covenant was brought to the island on the Nile, Elephantine, where it was hidden in the Temple of Judah for about 250 years, before it was taken away again after the Egyptians conquered the island, and was once more hidden on an island called Kamekerkos, that is to say, Kirkos, and namely for about another 800 years. Approx. 400 years A.D. That is after Emmanuel's birth. The Ark of the Covenant was stored in a chapel in today's Axum in Ethiopia, which was during that time called Saba, where it has been guarded by special guards ever since. What is happening with it today is unknown to me.
Another question. Florina told me to ask you, what does one call the disease that struck the 16-year-old girl, who is slanderously portrayed as an extraterrestrial in the Santilli film? What disease did the girl suffer from?
Progene?
Note by Billy. Ptaah and designation.
We once talked about the earthquake lights, that is light phenomena, that occur in the atmosphere and also above the ground shortly before earthquakes arise. How do they develop?
By electromagnetic tensions caused by the movements and elements in the Earth's interior. The atmospheric light phenomena of this type in particular are often erroneously interpreted as unknown flying devices. These light phenomena are harbingers of emerging earthquakes. Therefore, they are called earthquake lights.
You and Quetzal, you have once spoken of talpos bacteria, so-called heat bacteria, that, for example, live in fire, as also in lava and magma, and in hot springs, in hot mud, and even in suns.
That is correct. It is about bacteria that only become really alive and active at high temperatures. The activation temperature of the talpos bacteria is different according to their species. So there are indeed those which begin to develop their activity at 80 degrees Celsius of heat. as also those which are only in their living zone with several hundred or thousand, with tens of thousands, or even indeed only with 1,000,000 degrees of heat. As a rule, their nourishment consists of hot gases of the most diverse kinds, some of which are also radioactive.
That probably also explains that they exist in suns and hot nebulae of outer space. Is that also the case with galactic central suns?
This question is actually superfluous, because the talpose bacteria exist in their thousand-fold diversity wherever heat exists. They are different in form from the common bacteria and are absolutely insensitive to antibiotics, as is not the case with the heat-intolerant bacteria. Of the thousands of species of talpose bacteria, only a few are known to earthly scientists, whereby, by the way, they are referred to as archaebacteria by them, of which at present about 20 may be known, which corresponds to an extremely small number if one considers that these bacteria regarding their species range in the thousands and perform the most diverse functions.
I know. Some of them form, for example, methane gas, whereby they absorb and convert carbon dioxide and hydrogen as nourishment. Others feed on salt substances, on sulfur gases, on radioactively charged gases of various kinds, as well as on acid gases, etc., whereby they always convert these substances into other forms, whereby a large part of all life is guaranteed. As in the conventional realm of bacteria, the talpose, that is to say archaebacteria, also work in a form of continuous transformation of material, the transition and the change, whereby one thing is decomposed and transformed into something new. But how far are earthly scientists with these cognitions?
They are still quite at the beginning of their efforts and research, and do not yet have a clue as to how far-reaching the functions are and how manifold the talpose bacteria are in their numbers.
However, you say that at least they have found the beginning.
That corresponds to what I said.
Well, you know that I once used the torture and death penalty brochure to draw the attention of the Chinese government and the Chinese embassies to the unhuman machinations of sentencing and contempt for human beings in China. Unfortunately, there has thereupon never been a reaction from the Chinese region. Is it really not possible to get to these human beings?
The road is long and extremely onerous and arduous, and the unhumanenesses in China will still continue for a very long time to come. This both in the politics as well as in the attitude of immense numbers of human beings. The horrors that are being carried out in China are even more horrifying than what is made known in the public media, because in China things happen that are beneath all human dignity and humaneness. One should only think, in that regard, of the fact that human beings are sentenced to death and executed on a massive scale by official courts, just in order to gain access to the organs of those killed, which are then sold for costly money and re-implanted, that is to say, transplanted again into those who are fully solvent. Thereby, it makes no difference whether the convicted persons are really guilty or innocent, or whether it concerns a potato or bicycle thief or a pimp or murderer. One should in this context also think of Tibet and its population, as well as the Buddhist monks there, who have been harassed, tortured, and murdered for years, just because this is demanded by the unhumaneness of the Chinese rulers and politics and practiced by the dehumanized military minions. Or one should consider the unhuman birth control policy pursued in China. This is not about the rational resolution and law of the one-child marriage, because the state of China's population growth demands this drastic measure, and there is really no objection to it. However, what is done and committed in reprisals and unhuman machinations around this law surpasses everything imaginable in terms of unethics, abomination, and contempt for human beings and life. The worst of all is probably the terrible fact that the contempt for human rights and humaneness in China goes so far that newborns are simply killed by the medical practitioners with a syringe of poison. Acid, iodine, or alcohol injected into the fontanelle when the newborns were not conceived in a manner allowed by the state and the norm of having one child per marriage was exceeded. Although the Chinese legislation does not directly order this infanticide through an explicit law, it tolerates this customary practice, as well as treating unwanted children of all kinds in so-called orphanages unhumanly brutal, tying them to beds or chairs, maltreating them and treating them worse than an epitome of the scum, and leaving them hungry and thirsty, from which they then usually die miserably, often also sick and covered with wounds and rashes.
There is probably no second country on Earth that is as bad in these regards as China. Fontanelle. Did you say that the newborns would receive lethal injections into the fontanelle? That is the cranial opening of newborns, which only closes after an extended period of time, by growing over?
That is right.
It is simply necessary that all responsible human beings strive to address and reprimand China for its crimes against humanity, political and penal, as well as other humanity-despising machinations. And that time and time again. There is probably no other way.
Unfortunately, no. But now, my friend, we should turn to a number of other things that are privately related to you. There are also other important issues to be discussed that relate to the mission.
Well, fire away.